Before it was a kingdom, it was just a river, water moving through dry earth, indifferent to the people watching it. They stood at the edge of the Limpopo, looking at a landscape that demanded everything and gave very little back. Down in the valley, life was measured in cattle and grain. Thousands of people living in the dust, building the foundation of an empire they would never see. The specific exhaustion of being the roots of a tree you are not allowed to climb. But above them, rising 200 feet into the air, was the hill, sandstone and silence. A physical separation carved into the earth, designed to keep the sacred out of reach and the ordinary below. There was only one path up, narrow enough that you had to turn sideways in places. To reach the top was to leave the noise of the world behind and enter a space where every footstep was watched. At the top, there was no palace, just a courtyard, swept clean every morning. The king sat in the center, visible to no one, speaking to no one. Power here wasn't about being seen. It was about the terrifying weight of being entirely alone.
They didn't build pyramids. They didn't carve their faces into mountains. They folded gold foil over wood, stapling it together with tiny metal pins to make a rhinoceros the size of a hand, a masterpiece made in the dark, buried in the dark, waiting in the dark. We think of them as isolated, but their reach was global. Ivory and gold walked down to the coast, loaded onto dhows, and sailed to India, to China. They were the quiet engine at the bottom of a world they would never actually see. They didn't just trade glass, they made it, melting it down in clay crucibles, drawing it into threads, cutting it into beads. The specific pride of taking the world's raw material and remaking it in your own image. The wall wasn't built to keep enemies out. It was built to keep the people in. Stone stacked without mortar, rising higher every year. The quiet realization that your home is only half a world, and you are locked out of the other half. In the center of the valley, wealth wasn't abstract. It breathed. Thousands of cattle, their horns scraping the sky, their hooves packing the earth into a floor of solid clay. To own them was to own the future. To lose them was to cease to exist.
All the gold in the world couldn't buy rain. That was the secret kept in the caves. The king ruled the people, but the rainmaker ruled the king. The terrifying fragility of a civilization balanced entirely on the promise of water. Then the rain stopped. Not for a season, for a decade. The river shrank to a muddy scar. The grass turned to ash, and the specific, quiet terror of watching your world dry up began. When the rituals fail, the gods don't just leave, they are replaced. The rainmaker's power evaporated with the water. The grief of realizing the people you trusted with the sky had no more control over it than you did. Without water, the grass died. Without grass, the cattle died. When the cattle died, the wealth died. The specific hollow feeling of standing in a space that used to be the center of your universe, now filled only with bones. They didn't fight over the last drops of water. They didn't go to war. They sat in the courtyard on the hill, in the silence of a failed kingdom, and made the hardest choice a leader can make.
To admit that the center could not hold. They walked down the hill, not in a panic, not in a rout, in a long, quiet line, leaving behind the courtyards, the walls, the graves of their kings, the profound, heavy dignity of walking away from the only home you've ever known, because staying means death. And then the hill was empty. The wind blew through the courtyard, moving dust across a floor that had been swept clean just days before. The specific, echoing silence of a room after the argument is over and everyone is left. The earth didn't mourn them. It just took them back. Thatch rotted, wood splintered, grass grew through the packed clay of the kraal. Within a generation, the valley looked exactly as it had before they arrived. The graves on the hillside slowly sank into the soil. The gold was buried with the kings, hidden under the earth, waiting. The quiet tragedy of a legacy sinking back into the dirt, becoming just another layer of the ground.
700 years later, the hill was quiet again. Until the 1930s, when men with trowels and string grids arrived. They came looking for history, but they weren't prepared for what they would find. They dug into the summit, expecting empty graves. Instead, their trowels hit metal.
The sudden, heart-stopping moment when the dirt gives way and the past reaches up and grabs you by the throat. Out of the dust came the rhino, gold foil, folded and stapled, gleaming in the trench light. It was perfect. It was indigenous, and it was about to be buried all over again. But the men who found it couldn't accept it. To admit that black Africans had built a kingdom, forged gold, and ruled a continent was to break the story they had told themselves. So they locked it in a drawer for 40 years. The gold sat in the dark. While the world above argued about who belonged in the landscape, the proof of their genius was locked in a drawer, breathing dust. The specific, suffocating grief of a truth that is too dangerous to be spoken.
When the drawer was finally opened, they didn't just find gold. They found the kings. Laid out on stainless steel tables under fluorescent lights, measured and cataloged. The profound indignity of having your sacred rest turned into a peer-reviewed paper. It took decades, but the bones were finally brought back, returned to the hill, laid back in the earth, this time with the permission of the descendants. The quiet, heavy relief of a debt finally paid, even if it was 700 years late. Now, they come in buses. They walk up the paved path, take their photos, and read the signs. They look at the hill and see a monument. They don't see the panic of the drought, the silence of the empty courtyard, or the 40 years in the dark. The river still flows. The grass still turns brown in the dry season. The hill still sits above the valley, silent and flat-topped. The earth doesn't care about the kings. It only cares about the rain. If you stand in the valley at dusk, when the light plays tricks, you can almost see them. The ghosts of the valley, walking the paths they wore into the earth. A specific, haunting feeling that the people who built the world you're standing in
within are still watching you. There is a specific grief for a history that was edited before you arrived, for a story that was locked in a drawer and only told when it was convenient. You are mourning a people you never met, for a loss you never witnessed. The rhino sits in a glass case under a spotlight. It is safe. It is preserved, but it is a long way from the dark cave where it was made, and a long way from the hands that folded the gold. We climb the hill today not to conquer it, to witness it, to stand in the empty courtyard and feel the weight of the silence, to acknowledge that the center of the world is wherever someone decides to build it. The throne is just a raised dais of packed earth. The king is just a skeleton in a university drawer. The kingdom is just a hill in the savannah. The river doesn't remember their names. The grass doesn't know about their gold. The earth just keeps turning, indifferent to the empires that rise and fall upon its back. They were here. They built a world on a hill, and they left it behind. And for a long time, the world pretended they never existed at all. But the hill is still here. And if you look closely at the dirt, at the gold, at the bones, you can see them, the forgotten kings of a world we barely remember, waiting in the dark to be found.